Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. They say the worst betrayals come not from enemies, but from those who sit beside you in moments of joy. I never quite understood that until the night the light changed in my wife's eyes, and the shadows grew long in places I'd once trusted. It started simply. Life always does. We were seated at a dinner party, a soft clinking of cutlery and rhythm with low conversation, laughter mingling with the rich notes of a piano in the background. I remember the scent of rosemary and lemon that clung to the air, the way the crystal glasses caught the chandelier's golden light. And I remember her laugh. That laugh. It was subtle, barely different, a fraction longer than it used to be, warmer, more alive, and it wasn't for me. I looked across the table at Daniel, my oldest friend. We'd met in college. He was the gregarious one, the effortless charmer, the kind of man who was always half late, half apologetic, and entirely forgiven. He'd been best man at my wedding, godfather to my daughter, and once, in a more innocent time, the keeper of my secrets. He was also looking at her. Not just looking, but watching. It lasted less than a second. I'm sure no one else noticed, but I did. We drove home in silence. She tapped away on her phone, fingers dancing. I told myself she was replying to the girls' group chat, her book club or Pilates friends. But doubt is a quiet thing. It starts with a whisper and grows teeth. That night I lay beside her, listening to the softness of her breath. My eyes studied the ceiling, a familiar constellation of shadows. And for the first time in 17 years, I felt alone in that bed. But I said nothing. I didn't confront her, didn't search her phone, didn't accuse. Instead, I waited. Over the next few weeks, I began to observe, gently pulling back the curtain on a world I hadn't realized had shifted. She changed her perfume, said she just needed something lighter for spring. The new scent lingered on her scarves, even when she claimed she hadn't worn them that day. She began taking walks, long ones, said they helped clear her head. I encouraged her, told her it was good to take time for herself. But I followed once, stayed far enough not to be seen, close enough to confirm what my instincts had started to scream. She wasn't walking alone. They met at the old garden district, where the azaleas bloom in quiet corners, and the city's noise seems to bow out of respect. They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss. But the intimacy was there, in the way they stood close, in the way he touched her back as they parted. Again, I said nothing. I began collecting details. Receipts she left in pockets, changed calendar entries, emails she didn't know I could see. Nothing explosive, nothing vulgar, just enough. And Daniel? He remained Daniel, smiling, visiting, bringing expensive wine when he came over, laughing with my daughter, asking me about work. I shook his hand, told him how glad I was to see him, let him think I was blind. Inside, I was a furnace of quiet resolve. My daughter Ella was finishing high school, an honor student, talented cellist. She had her mother's laugh and my stubbornness. I knew she suspected nothing. The home was intact, the dinners continued, the birthdays were remembered. But I was building a story, one no one else could see. By the time graduation approached, I had everything I needed. But this wasn't about revenge. I didn't want to scream, didn't want a courtroom or a spectacle. I wanted stillness, dignity, the kind of silence that echoes louder than any shout. The ceremony was set for late spring. A beautiful hall downtown, all marble and sunlight, with velvet curtains framing a stage where generations had walked in cap and gown. We'd rented a small reception space nearby, something elegant, intimate, a celebration. I planned for that day the way a composer writes a requiem. Every detail mattered. A week before, I had the envelope prepared. Inside it were printed emails, date-stamped call logs, photos I'd taken. Not scandalous ones, but enough to strip away denial. On top of it all was a letter. Just one page. No accusations, no venom, only truth. And my decision. I'd written it dozens of times, rewritten it more. My handwriting was neat, the ink a deep blue. I addressed it simply without sentiment. Her name in the center. The day came. I wore my finest suit. Ella looked radiant, the pride in her eyes reminding me why I had waited, why I had stayed calm. This day was hers, and no one would steal it, not even the truth. My wife stood beside me in a sea of proud parents. She looked beautiful. Of course she did. That was always part of the story. Her hand touched mine briefly, a gesture for the cameras, perhaps. I let it rest there. Let the illusion hold for now. Daniel arrived late, as always. Took a seat behind us, smiling as if nothing had fractured. He leaned forward, whispered something about traffic. I nodded, thanked him for coming. I could feel the envelope in my inner jacket pocket. It was not heavy, but it carried weight. Every corner was crisp. It had waited with me, silently, patiently. And when Ella walked across that stage, her name echoing through the hall, the applause rising, I smiled. Not the broken smile of a betrayed man, but the composed one of a father who had chosen restraint. We clapped. We stood. We celebrated. Afterward, the reception was bathed in warm light. Small string quartet. Light hors d'oeuvres, laughter, glasses raised. I watched them all, the family, the friends, the deceivers, and the innocent. And then, as the music shifted into something soft and timeless, I walked toward her. She was speaking to Daniel. Of course she was. I stepped close, smiled. "Can I steal you for a second?" She turned, blinking. Of course. I guided her toward the balcony. The evening light touched her face in gold. Below, the city murmured. I reached into my jacket, handed her the envelope. She looked at it, puzzled. "What's this?" "A truth you left unspoken," I said quietly. She laughed, confused, nervous. "What?" "Open it when you're alone." She stared at me, something shifting in her eyes. A faint tremor. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe recognition. I didn't wait for her to respond. Behind us, the celebration continued. Ella was laughing with her friends. Daniel stood inside, holding a drink, glancing toward the door. And I? I walked away. She didn't open the envelope that night. I know this because I watched her. From the moment I handed it to her on the balcony, her fingers curled around it as though it were a fragile thing, too delicate to look at, too heavy to ignore. She smiled, made some excuse about needing air, and tucked it into her purse with the same grace she used to host dinner parties or light candles without looking at the match. We drove home in silence. Ella sat in the back seat, glowing from the praise of teachers and friends, her diploma in hand, her future unfolding in bright ribbons. I listened to her chatter, asked questions, laughed in the right places. Beside me, my wife was quiet, too quiet for her usual post-event buzz. I saw her glance at her purse once, then twice. She didn't reach for it. That night, as Ella slept and the house settled into stillness, she went to the study. I heard the soft click of the door, the creak of the chair, the paper sliding from its envelope. She sat there for a long time. I didn't go to her. That was part of the decision I had made weeks earlier. Not to console her through the ruin of her own deception. Not to rage or demand an explanation. Just to let the silence do the speaking. When she finally emerged, her face was pale, drawn, as if she'd seen a ghost of herself she hadn't expected. Her eyes met mine in the hallway, but she said nothing. No tears, no apologies. Only a long, loaded silence. She walked past me and went upstairs. That was the beginning of the unraveling. In the mornings, she made coffee for two, but left mine untouched. At dinner, she cooked without asking what I wanted. We were still a family by appearance, still sitting together, still speaking in the language of routine. But the soul, had been drained from our rituals. She tried to talk once. It was 2 days later, just after Ella left for a friend's sleepover. She stood at the kitchen sink, twisting a dishcloth in her hands. The sun was low, warm gold spilling through the window, and in that quiet moment, she turned to me. "Can we talk?" I met her gaze. "I read everything," she said. I don't know what to say." I nodded once, calm, still. She waited for something, anger, an accusation, maybe even a plea, but I offered none. "I never wanted to hurt you," she added quietly. It wasn't a confession, more of a defense. "I believe that," I said. The simplicity of my words startled her. She blinked, as though expecting me to raise my voice, to demand names, to curse her. But the truth was, I had done all that in private, quietly in my heart, months ago. Now I was empty of fire. "You had chances to stop," I said, "but you didn't." She looked away. "I'm not interested in hearing the reasons," I continued. "I know how these things happen. I know people drift. What matters is that you chose it over and over again, in secret, with someone I trusted." Her shoulders fell. "I've hired an attorney," I said gently. "There's no drama coming, no war, just a clean end." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. "I never wanted to lose this," she whispered. "Then you should have protected it," I replied. I left the room before she could say more. Ella knew nothing of the details, only that we were going through changes and that we were committed to keeping her stability intact. We agreed on that, at least. No shouting matches, no stormy scenes, just honesty in measured pieces. Daniel reached out a week later, a text message, 2 words. "We should talk." I stared at it for a long moment, then placed the phone down and let it ring later when he called. I wasn't ready, not yet, but I would see him, just not on his terms. In the meantime, I began moving forward. I had already secured a small apartment a few blocks from Ella's new college campus. Nothing grand, but peaceful. A place where the morning light came in quietly and the nights were filled with the kind of silence that didn't ache. She'd be starting school in 2 months. I'd planned everything so that she wouldn't have to choose sides. Our house would remain hers, at least until she was settled. I'd move out quietly. No boxes piled in the hallway, no bitter scenes. Just departure. The night before I left, I stood in our bedroom, my side of the bed neatly made, the closet half empty. She came in, leaned against the doorway. "You're really going," she said. I nodded. She stepped closer. "You won't even let me explain?" "There's nothing I don't already know," I said gently. "You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." She reached out, fingertips grazing my arm. I stepped back, not cruelly, just firmly. Enough to say, that chapter has ended. And I saw it then. The recognition, the finality. Somehow, she'd expected forgiveness, or at least anger she could mend. But I had offered only truth, and truth once revealed cannot be folded back into silence. I moved out on a Sunday morning. Ella ayudó a llevar cajas, alegre y emocionada por el nuevo apartamento. I showed her the little coffee shop nearby, the bookstore, the park. We had lunch at a place with sidewalk tables and string lights overhead. It felt light, unburdened. She never asked about the deeper reasons. Maybe she knew enough. Maybe she didn't want to know more. I didn't press. Daniel reached out again the following week. This time, I answered. We met at a quiet restaurant near the bay. Neutral ground, no history. Just 2 men, once brothers, now strangers in the same skin. He arrived wearing his usual effortless charm. Smile tight but present. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. I nodded, offered no handshake. We ordered drinks. Small talk lasted about 30 seconds. He leaned forward. "I messed up. I know that. I didn't plan it. It just happened." I looked at him. Really looked. "Daniel," I said calmly, "what you did wasn't an accident. It was a choice you made repeatedly. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake." He sighed. I didn't mean it like that. You meant to betray me quietly, and then live like it never happened. His face stiffened. I didn't come here to fight, I said. I came to look you in the eye and remind you that some losses don't scream. They simply leave. He swallowed hard. Do you hate me? No, I said truthfully. Hate takes energy. You're just done. We finished our drinks in silence. When we stood to leave, he reached out, not for a handshake, for something else. Connection, maybe. Remorse. But I stepped back. We're not those men anymore, I said. Take care of yourself. And I walked away. Back in my apartment that evening, I sat on the balcony, listening to the soft hush of wind in the trees. The world didn't feel broken anymore, just quieter, more honest. I didn't know what my wife and Daniel would do next. Maybe they'd try to build something. Maybe they'd crumble under the weight of what they'd done. That was their path now, not mine. What mattered was that I had not let bitterness own me. I had chosen clarity over chaos, stillness over vengeance. And in that quiet space I had carved out, something unexpected began to bloom. Peace. Summer passed softly, like turning pages in a book you didn't know you'd finish so soon. Ella settled into college life with ease. Her dorm room was already full of string lights, Polaroids, and books stacked in corners. We met for coffee once a week, sometimes more. She liked to talk about philosophy classes, new friends, the quiet independence she was learning to love. I listened, watched her grow, and smiled at how little she knew of the storm that had once hovered just beyond her reach. She never asked questions about the separation, not directly. But once, while we sat beneath an old oak near the campus, she said something that lingered. You've seemed lighter lately, Dad, like something heavy let go. I nodded. Maybe I stopped carrying something that wasn't mine. She tilted her head, curious but respectful. Do you ever miss it? The life before? I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, but without the shadows. I miss the parts that were real, I said. But sometimes what we miss isn't the thing itself. It's the person we were when we believed in it. She nodded slowly, as if tasting the thought. That night, after I dropped her off, I drove past the old house. It looked the same. Porch light on, curtains drawn just as they always had been. But there was something distant about it, as if it had become a photograph in a frame I no longer needed. I didn't stop. A few weeks later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a letter. Her handwriting on the envelope. My name in full, written with the same curve and pressure I once knew by heart. Inside, it was quiet. No pleads, no grand confessions, just this. I never understood the cost of silence until you gave me yours. What I thought was control was cowardice. What I called love was comfort. You gave me dignity, even when I had stolen it from us both. I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I hope you've found peace. There was no signature, just a single pressed flower, flat and delicate between the folds of paper. One we had planted together years ago, a violet, a symbol of loyalty. Though I knew that, for her, it had become something else entirely, perhaps regret. I kept the letter in a drawer, not to revisit pain, but as a reminder that endings can be quiet and still hold meaning. Daniel never reached out again. I had heard through a mutual acquaintance that things between them didn't last. It didn't surprise me. They had built something on broken trust, and no structure like that holds for long. I felt no satisfaction in that, no triumph. Just a quiet acknowledgement of how truth always rises, eventually. As the months passed, I rebuilt slowly. Not in the way people rush to move on, with loud new beginnings or forced optimism, but gently. I started going to a gallery downtown every Friday evening, a tradition just for me. Quiet walks through paintings and photographs that didn't ask anything of me except attention. I met someone there once. Her name was Claire. She wore glasses with frames just a little too big for her face, and walked like someone who loved rainy days. We spoke briefly about a black and white photo of a broken bridge. This, she said, feels like heartbreak and healing at once. I smiled. Maybe they're the same thing, just different directions. We didn't exchange numbers that night, just names. But something about that moment stayed with me. Weeks later, she was there again. This time we walked through the gallery together, then got coffee, then began to learn the quiet rhythms of each other's days. No declarations, no rush, just presence. One morning, as we walked along the waterfront, she turned to me and asked a question no one had in a long time. Do you ever think about your past? I considered my answer, then said, sometimes. But I try to treat it like a book I've read. I know how it ends. I know what I learned. I don't need to read it again. She nodded. That's rare. Most people either burn the book or get stuck rereading it. I smiled. I think we get to choose who we become after the last chapter. And that's what this had become, really. A new story, not written in opposition to the old one, but beside it. A life not defined by betrayal, but by what came after. Eventually, Ella came to stay with me for a weekend. She walked around my small apartment, looked at the art I'd chosen, the books I'd collected, the life I had rebuilt in soft, deliberate ways. You seem different, she said. I am, I replied, but only in the ways that matter. She nodded, and after a long pause, said something I will never forget. I don't know everything that happened between you and Mom. I don't need to. But thank you for making it feel like the world didn't fall apart, for protecting me from the worst of it. I didn't say anything, just placed a hand on hers. That was enough. We never stopped learning how to be strong. Not the loud kind of strength that lifts weights or wins arguments, but the quiet kind. The strength to endure, to choose restraint when pain demands noise, to walk away without setting fire to the bridge behind you. The envelope I handed her that day at graduation, it didn't just hold evidence. It held a mirror. Not for her, for all of us. To see who we become when no one's watching, to realize that truth isn't always about exposure. It's about acknowledgement. And dignity is often found not in what we reveal, but in what we refuse to destroy. I didn't get justice in the usual way. I didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful act isn't revenge. It's peace, unapologetic, undeniable, and earned.